NASCAR has changed a lot over the years, and a lot of it has been really gimmicky and designed to create mindless carnage. I was born in '09 and became a fan in the early 2010s, so I really haven't seen a form of NASCAR without any of this. But as I've gotten older, I've really begun to appreciate just how good NASCAR was in the 90s and early to mid 2000s. So here's my opinion, as someone who's grown up in nothing but modern NASCAR: 5 things about the sport that suck today. This rule is so low because, in my opinion, it isn't the rule itself, but it's the enforcement. Let's say we have a super speedway race, so let's spawn in our track and let's spawn in our race. Now let's place Cody Ware on the apron and give him some sort of issue, so he's going a lot slower than the pack and he's pulled off the racetrack. Now ordinarily, the decision here would be caution, and I agree, but in a situation like this, you don't want a bunch of cars racing down here, for obvious reasons. But they went so over the top with the rule that it is no longer seen as the safety precaution that it should be. The general idea of the rule is that you're not allowed to go below the yellow line to advance your position on the racetrack. Okay, well, what if it's the last lap? What if you go below the line and start passing someone but move above the line to finish the pass? What if you get forced below the line? What the fuck is the limit here? What does this rule actually mean? Well, as with most things about NASCAR, they really just kinda...
They don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that?
The first instance of the yellow line rule causing controversy was in the 2001 Pepsi 400, where Johnny Benson very obviously forces Tony Stewart below the yellow line, but NASCAR black flags him for it anyway. Tony just straight up ignores the black flag and looks to finish 6th in the race, but NASCAR ultimately placed him at the tail end of the lead lap. Now, to me, this is the wrong call. If you're going to penalize a driver for going below the line, even if they're forced, all that is going to tell the driver is to hold his ground and let the car chop across their nose or risk a penalty. And all that is going to lead to is more crashes like this one. Discouraging a driver from doing all possible to avoid a potential accident is the completely wrong move to make. But if this slightly odd ruling is the route you're going to go with, at least stay consistent with it.
Hart Jr. inside of Ricky Craven. Jr. to the bottom there. 3 wide for the lead at Talladega.
This is for the top spot as turns 3 and 4. Dale Jr. shoots out ahead.
NASCAR wouldn't penalize Dale Earnhardt Jr. for this move. Now let me just say this. The argument of whether or not Dale Jr. was ahead of Kenseth before going below the line has gone back and forth for over 2 decades. Personally, I think it's very close, and honestly a judgment call. But he certainly isn't ahead of Jimmy Johnson on the outside line, and he certainly passes him below the line. You could make the argument that he was forced, but if Tony Stewart wasn't forced below the line in 2001, then Dale Jr. certainly isn't forced below the line here. This is a contradiction, and it would be far from the last, because in the 2006 Budge Shootout, this rule is going to go completely off the handle.
He tried not to get out of line, but the 11 got in under him. They were telling him to wave everybody off, and then he tried to get around Tony Stewart. And we got everybody trying to pit and go around people.
Try not to wreck. Carl Edwards, the 99 car, had no place to go. They all started slowing up in front of him and did a good job.
Just told him over the radio that he will have to make a pass through. He said, for what? He said, you passed below the yellow line. He said, I was trying to avoid the crash. And then his spotter, Bobby Hudson, chimed in and said, I'm sure other cars passed us because we slowed down.
What NASCAR is going to say that he passed the cars, the 5 and 48 that were making a pit stop. He passed those under the yellow line.
But what else was he going to do
He's going
in
to
that
pass them
situation?
above the yellow line because they're slowing down to pit road speed.
He's either going to run him over or he's going to do what he did. What he did, he avoided a crash. I don't know any other thing he could have done in that situation.
The commentators just pretty much did the talking for me, but this is probably the most baffling call I've ever seen. Edwards has nowhere to go here. He can't match his brakes because there's a car behind him. He can't go to his right because there's cars over there too. The only alternative to completely annihilating himself and Jimmy Johnson is to go below the line. Penalizing Carl for this doesn't even make sense in the rulebook, which states the driver cannot advance his position below the yellow line. But here's the thing, Carl net loses positions. He passes the 2 cars that were making a pit stop, sure, but in the process he loses 3 spots and the draft of the lead pack. The things I want to say about this call probably aren't allowed on YouTube, but it's one of the worst calls in NASCAR history. And now you can see why everyone wants to get rid of this rule, because this is just getting stupid at this point.
At Talladega in a NASCAR Sprint Cup car.
He's gonna have to do a lot of blocking right here. They've got to run on him. Got to run.
Here they come.
I can't go down there and do that, though.
Actually, I think it's legal on the last lap.
He might have got it right there.
Here we have an even worse version of the 2001 Pepsi 400. Tony Stewart, welcome back to the video, forces Regan Smith below the line. Regan continues to be forced below the line because Tony isn't getting out of his way. He finally merges back onto the racing line as soon as he's able to and wins the race. But NASCAR decides to black flag Regan for passing Tony below the line. Once again, I don't know what Regan is supposed to do here. The only other thing he could have done is hold his line and wreck Tony Stewart, but since he moved out of Tony's way, he ends up losing his first career win. We're almost done with this part of the video. We have one more example to look at, and it's the biggest clusterfuck of this entire segment.
Here comes the 17 and the 24. They're going to try to block. Eric gets up on the wall. Now the 24, a big run. He slides. They make more contact. 3 wide as they come out of 4. Hamlin to the inside. Side draft coming from the 24 car. Denny Hamlin. William Byron. Through the triangle coming up to the stripe. And as they go across the stripe, a photo finish. Denny Hamlin gets the nod.
This entire finish is just chaos, and we have a ton of bull to go through. NASCAR would penalize the number 21 of Matt DiBenedetto for forcing the number 24 of William Byron below the yellow line, which I already think is a weak call, but whatever. But Denny Hamlin puts all 4 wheels below the line to pass DiBenedetto and Byron. I guess the argument could be made that he was avoiding Byron, who at this point is dead sideways in the middle of the corner, but regardless of why he went down there, he still definitely advances his position below the yellow line. In the tri-oval, Chris Buescher is penalized for forcing Chase Elliott below the line. In my opinion, if an entire race finish ends up with half the guys racing for the win getting penalized or aggrieved by a rule that is poorly thought out and has no obvious limit, then it's a rule we should get rid of or rework. Because when the same situation gets a different call, it makes every future call a judgment call. The limit of the rule isn't even clear. What constitutes going below the line? Is it here? Is it here? Who knows? When a rule is poorly understood, it needs to be either reworded or thrown out. And luckily, Dale Jr. agrees with me.
Yeah, I got a great idea for everybody. How about we just get rid of the yellow line rule? Nobody really wants to see the races come down to these type of decisions, and I don't think it's going to crash more cars than we crashed today.
Low-key pretty based from Dale Jr. here. But anyway, while NASCAR wouldn't get rid of it, this will be the last major controversy regarding this rule to date, though I'm sure it will come into play again at some point. One thing I will say about stage racing is that it is at least better than the phantom debris caution, because giving NASCAR what is essentially God powers over the entire race would have serious consequences. In the 2015 Auto Club 400, Kurt Busch was running away with the win. With 2 laps to go, the yellow was thrown for debris in turn 4. And despite this caution being huge with it being so late in the going, NASCAR neglected to show the offending debris. On the restart, Kurt Busch splits Tony Stewart and Jeff Gordon in a bonsai 3-wide pass up the gut and takes the lead. And
Kurt Busch, there's the caution.
That's what happened. Caution is out. Debris turn 2.
well, at least this time the debris was actually shown on TV and wasn't some invisible hot dog wrapper on a part of the track where nobody drives. The field would go out there for another green light checkered, and
Front straightaway, Greg Biffle crashes with the white flag out. Now here come the leaders. Biffle sitting in the middle of the racetrack. The yellow has not yet flown.
so we throw the yellow for the aforementioned invisible hot dog wrapper, but not for a giant Greg Biffle who's wrecked on the front stretch and is stationary in the middle of the track. The running theory behind this strange set of calls is that NASCAR really did not want Kurt Busch to win this race. This was his first race back after indefinite suspension due to domestic abuse charges that were later dropped. So I guess NASCAR thought it would be a bad outlook for the driver caught up in all this controversy to win the race, but I'd say it has some holes. While it is for sure weird that they threw the caution for this and not this, Brad Keselowski was already ahead of Kurt by the time Biffle crashed. So throwing the caution or not would have had no effect on the outcome, but it's still weird nonetheless, and I wouldn't be shocked if it were true. In my opinion, this race is just the most egregious example. NASCAR, using debris as an excuse to put their entire hand on the scale, had been happening for over a decade prior at that point. It's happened far more times than this. So in my humble opinion, stage racing is better for a couple reasons. First, they are predetermined, you know when they're coming, and secondly, they reward points. But it is still just as gimmicky as Phantom Debris Yellows, but slightly more presentable and allowing NASCAR to throw its hat in the ring a bit more subtly. And one of the drivers who saw right through this was Carl Edwards, and this is what he had to say about it.
Let's start at the beginning. Let me just lay something out here for you guys. Is it everyone in this room, is it your understanding that when they throw the green flag, right, that the only reason another flag is going to come out, like a yellow one or a red one, before that checkered flag comes out, if there's a condition on the racetrack that is unsafe to continue the race? Is that what everybody understands? If we start getting away from that and we say, okay, halfway through the race, we're going to throw a caution, we're all going to line back up. Well, now it's two races, where the first race doesn't even matter. You know, now you just got a shorter race. The lead in basketball is a figurative one. It's a score. So it's as if you stop the quarter in basketball and then you even the score. In racing, I go out there and I gain an advantage. Maybe not this track, but at most tracks, I gain a big advantage. That caution erases that advantage. It's my opinion, my humble opinion. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's my opinion that takes something away from the sport.
This interview took place in 2012, 5 years before NASCAR rolled out stage yellows to start the 2017 season. And what do you know? Everybody is still saying the exact same things Carl did almost 15 years later. NASCAR is rolling out a new points format literally as I'm saying this, and once we get to number 1 on this list, I will talk about the new format. But let's get to number 3. NASCAR would adopt what was called at the time a green-white checkered finish after a controversial finish at Talladega in 2004 in which Jeff Gordon was leading over Dale Jr. The caution would come out with only a few laps left, and the remainder of the race was run under yellow flag conditions. Jeff Gordon would win, and the fans booed and threw beer cans onto the track. This is honestly the most NASCAR thing ever, but did it necessitate a rule change? No. Especially when you consider the fact that races had always ended at the scheduled distance since the dawn of time. So here's the rules of overtime as they stand today. If a yellow flag comes out and the race cannot be restarted before the scheduled distance is complete, then we go into a green-white checkered, or an overtime. The race will restart with 2 laps to go. If the leader gets to the white flag, signaling the start of the final lap, then the next flag, whether that be a caution flag or the checkered flag, will end the race. If the leader does not take the white flag before a yellow comes out, then the race will be restarted with 2 laps to go. That's how it is today, but with each controversial overtime we go through, the rules will be slightly different, and I'll try my best to explain any differences. Okay, let's roll. In the 2015 Fall Talladega race, we would only have 1 attempt at overtime, in large part due to this happening at Daytona in the Tri-Oval. The race had been relatively boring, and the only reason we're going into overtime is because Jamie McMurray's engine had too much McDonald's and crapped itself in the middle of the pack, which would end up putting an end to Greg Biffle's fuel mileage run and costing him what would have been his final Cup win. Damn it, Jamie. The field would go back green for their only attempt at overtime, and...
Spins his tires. Green flag back in the around goes to 48. And the caution is out. That will now determine who wins this race. They're saying that's not an attempt. NASCAR's saying not an attempt.
What do you mean that's not an attempt? Was it an embarrassingly stupid restart? Yeah, but the green flag was definitely out despite what NASCAR says. Hell, the damn ticker even had time to animate the green flag flying. Whatever. Anyway, Kevin Harvick was having a mechanical issue during this entire ordeal, and he needed to finish well in order to make the next round of the playoffs. When the green flag flies, Harvick does the only thing he can to save his season.
Green flag back in the air. The four not going. They wreck behind him. The green flag is out as they cross the start-finish line. Will they throw the caution? Trying to get back up to speed. Caution comes out.
I'm going to refrain from going into too much detail about this because it will come into play later in this video, but I find it funny how NASCAR racked the field back up again because of a stupid restart, only to end up with an even stupider restart. Kevin Harvick would wreck the field on the restart, and Joey Logano would end up winning the race. Don't even get me started on the overtime line, which was basically a second finish line painted on the backstretch that acted as the point drivers would have to hit to make the race official in overtime attempts. Yeah, this is about as stupid as it fucking sounds. This rule would rear its ugly head in the 2017 Brickyard 400, which is widely regarded as one of the craziest races in NASCAR history. Kyle Busch and Martin Truex Jr. looked like the dominant cars that day, but they took each other out on a restart and their pit crew started getting into it. Late in the race, Jimmie Johnson sent it 3 wide on Brad Keselowski and Kasey Kahne with a blowing engine, in one of the coolest things I've ever seen. He would wreck, which would end up forcing overtime, and what would happen next is the exact reason why overtime in motorsports is stupid.
Green flag back in the air. Caution's going to come out. They're wrecking behind them.
This is how a lot of overtimes end up. You're basically grouping up the entire field into a bundle, with a ton of positions just dangling out in front of them. This is the equivalent of putting live grenades into a sack and then throwing the sack off a cliff and watching them all blow up. On the second overtime attempt, another wreck would happen, but NASCAR would wait until Kasey Kahne passed the overtime line to throw the caution. Honestly, this was the right decision. Darkness was looming over the track because the race had taken forever. A rain delay, tons of accidents, and overtime had made the race just slog on. But this completely avoidable shit show turned one of the best Brickyard 400s in years into a complete crapfest of an ending. But if we're talking about overtime disasters, nothing comes close to the 2024 Ally 400 at Nashville. Denny Hamlin had worked his way past Ross Chastain late in the going, but the 21st place driver, Austin Cindric, would crash with 3 laps to go, setting up the worst half hour of racing I have ever seen.
So, Hamlin on the inside, Chastain on the outside. Green flag back in the air. A big push by the 5, and up the racetrack he catches the 1. Chastain into the wall. Big contact, caution comes out again. Will he have enough fuel to come all the way back around? They're wrecking behind him. The caution will come out again. There's more overtime. It's overtime again. 2 to go from Nashville. The 5 doesn't go. They bottle him behind him. Big wreck for the 8.
Out of fuel.
5 was out of fuel. Caution comes out again. Chase Briscoe fighting on the outside. Logano drifts up the racetrack. He takes Briscoe all the way up out of the groove.
If Briscoe gets to him.
White flag here by 2. Yellow's out. Crap.
One more time we're going to try overtime. They didn't get to the white flag. And you see the 4. Such a tough day for Josh Berry. Final time. He goes up the racetrack. Logano goes up to block. Off turn 4, Logano is going to win in Nashville.
This is the dumbest race I have seen in a long time. And to think, this race would be ultimately what put Joey Logano in position to win the 2024 championship. Logano, who was 14th when this whole mess began, would win the race. This win would be the only reason he made the playoffs in 2024, and he won the championship with the worst average finish of a champion ever. This stands in my mind as the worst overtime finish in NASCAR history, purely because of the effect it had on the championship. If you've been paying any attention at all while watching this video, you probably figured out by now that NASCAR's officiating leaves a lot to be desired. They'd penalize Carl Edwards for avoiding an accident, but would choose not to penalize Kevin Harvick for turning into Trevor Bayne and wrecking the entire field at the end of that Talladega race on purpose. They don't even understand when throwing a caution is appropriate, and I'm not talking about phantom debris yellows. In the 2025 Daytona duel, Erik Jones and Austin Cindric were in a dead heat for the win mere seconds from the finish line. A crash would happen behind them, and NASCAR threw the caution right before they got to the line. Because the field is frozen at the moment of caution, Austin Cindric would take the win, despite Jones beating him across the line. In the Daytona 500 that same season, the big one would happen entering Turn 3, and despite William Byron having nobody in the same stratosphere as him, NASCAR would keep it green. The very next week at Atlanta, a wreck would happen on the last lap, and despite a 3-wide battle for the lead up front exiting the final corner, NASCAR threw the yellow and ruined the finish. Later in the year at the Chicago Street Race, Cody Ware would have a violent wreck into the tire barriers, and NASCAR kept it green for way longer than they should have. And that's just examples from this past season. You want more? I can give you more. Ryan Preece would have an accident nearing the end of the 2024 Brickyard 400, and NASCAR waited until the leaders were almost back to him to throw the yellow, despite him being on the racing surface and not moving. In the 2022 All-Star race, NASCAR threw the caution when Ryan Blaney was mere feet from the line, meaning a restart per All-Star rules. What was the caution for anyway?
You see him up out of the groove, Stenhouse, and into the wall.
That was the caution? What the fuck? The NASCAR playoffs are something I'm really glad I can refer to in the past tense. The playoffs were rolled out in 2014, and in the time it was in place from that year all the way to the end of the 2025 season, produced a trail of chaos, misery, and missing rings. Any format where you can go winless and win the title is probably not a good thing, and any format where you can win 35 of the 36 races and lose the title is definitely a bad thing. In 2015, Kyle Busch would win the title despite missing the first 11 races of the season due to injury. Was it a cool redemption story? Sure. But should it have been mathematically possible? No. The Big Three losing the 2018 championship has to be one of the biggest L moments in playoff history. One of the Big Three, Kevin Harvick, would lose the title again in 2020, despite dominating the year with 9 victories in a crime against humanity. Thanks for the reference, B. Then you have what I'm going to call the big finale of this entry. The 2024 Martinsville cutoff race was an absolute disaster. Late in the race, the Final Four were starting to take shape. Joey Logano and Tyler Reddick were locked in, with wins earlier in the round, and Ryan Blaney was well on his way to winning the race and locking up his spot. The last spot was going to come down to William Byron and Christopher Bell. Byron's car is fading late in the race, and despite Ross Chastain and Austin Dillon having every chance in the world to pass Byron, they chose not to help Byron make the Final Four. Number 1 and the number 3 cars, which stay side by side and act as a barrier between Byron and the rest of the field. This would allow Byron to get a spot in the Final Four, provided that Christopher Bell doesn't gain any positions. On the final lap, fellow Toyota driver Bubba Wallace would let Bell pass him to gain the 1 point he needed to advance. NASCAR would penalize Bell, not for getting assisted into the Final Four, but because he rode the wall exiting the final corner, which had been made illegal after Ross Chastain's wall ride. The 1 and 3 cars were penalized for helping Byron, but Byron didn't lose his spot in the Final Four. They set a precedent with Spingate, where the drivers manipulating the race would be penalized, as well as the party they were trying to help. I talked about Spingate in a prior video on this channel, and I'll put it up in the top right corner of your screen. In my opinion, Kyle Larson should have made the Final Four. Now, before I end this video, I know I have sounded like a negative Nancy all video. I've essentially been hating on NASCAR for the past 25 minutes already. But I do have solutions for all these problems. For the yellow line rule, make it anything goes on the last lap. Nobody wants to see a driver lose a race because of rules like this. For stage racing, I actually say keep it around, but don't throw a yellow for stage breaks, for Christ's sake. Just award the damn points and get on with it. Overtime has got to go. Let's go back to the way it was before 2004 and end races at their scheduled distance. As for the officiating, just making it more consistent would go a long way. And as for the playoffs, I don't even need to come up with anything. The chase format is back to start the 2026 season. This will be getting its own video in the near future, so stay tuned for that. But this is the biggest W that NASCAR has taken in my lifetime and longer. So we'll see how that turns out. Thanks for watching.